All right, the new Model Y. I've not driven this yet. Well, I guess I have. I'm at the supercharger, but this is my first situation with it. Let's head out and see how it is. It took me forever to finally get behind the wheel of one of these, but now that I'm here, it's got me thinking if this is the car to buy, because it's offering a lot. But I've been in the market for a new car or an EV for what feels like forever at this point. I've been talking about it forever, but we just haven't pulled the trigger. And really the reason is because there are just so many options right now. But not only that, there's so many options, and then there's so many options coming really soon. So picking which car to buy, it's not the easiest thing right now, and I don't think it should be that easy. It shouldn't be taken lightly. These cars are incredibly expensive these days, so you want to make the right choice. Now for me, there are clearly two options you should be considering if you're in the market in the coming year to 2 years. And it is this, what I'm sitting in, the new Model Y, or it is the upcoming Rivian R2. Those two cars, I think, are the ones to look at for a few reasons, not only personally, but just in general. And so now that I'm behind the wheel of this thing, let's take a look and then also see what Rivian has to offer. And we'll see which one of these cars we should put our money behind. For some reason, it seems Tesla and Rivian are the biggest competitors with each other. I don't know that that's actually true, but that's just kind of what it feels like. And I think it's because out of the American companies that are making EVs, Rivian's really the only other one that, is getting popular success. As a business, how are they doing? That's its own question. But in terms of popular culture, what people think about the cars, Rivian has done an excellent job at just promoting themselves and actually getting cars on the road that people actually like. And well, that goes a long ways to making a successful product. And it also means that when the new generation is on the horizon, well, there's something to be excited about there. Now the R2, it's a big deal for Rivian. It is that car that every single new manufacturer seems to have to get to, which is moving on from its less production and higher price vehicle onto its higher production and lower cost vehicle, so that they can get this into just more and more hands. And that seems to at least still be the case for Rivian. They're aiming for $45,000 for this R2, and they're still expecting it in 2026. And that, as far as Rivian is concerned, hasn't changed. We have gotten some updates of their casting. RJ, the CEO, is focused on Rivian R2. Pretty much anytime we see him, he's talking about it in some way. In fact, according to Rivian, they are already in the process of, building these verification builds, which are what they use to kind of make sure everything they touted about the car and everything they're planning to use for the car, make sure it actually works. We saw this back when they did the Rivian R1T and R1S. They would do all these, tests with these vehicles. Apparently they're in that stage right now. So it's not just some prototype, they're working their way to it. And, honestly, we're in the middle of 2025 already. So 2026 is not all that far away. Real quick though, before I continue, I want to thank this video's sponsor, Kinsta. Kinsta is the #1 provider of managed hosting for your WordPress site. And they offer pretty much everything you need, from ease of use. They can migrate your site over for you, and you get 24/7 support, most importantly, with a real person. Now, Kinsta is trusted by over 120,000 different companies that you have heard of and probably used, like TripAdvisor, Hootsuite, or Indeed. In fact, they are rated #1 in WordPress hosting by G2, and they outranked 357 other companies to get that spot. That is a pretty big deal. There's stiff competition, but Kinsta got it right. And best of all, they deliver on what they promise. So if you end up using them, you can get up to 200% faster performance on your site, and you get great security like enterprise level firewall. Plus you can get an SLA backed uptime guarantee of 99.9%. So with this, you're going to have a site that runs fast, is secure, and just works the way you want it to. But like I was saying, I think one of the best parts is that if you ever do encounter issues, or you just need to make sure everything is going the way you want, there is a real person you can talk to 24/7. So you can ask them a question and they have you covered. So if you want to check this out for yourself, I'll leave everything linked down below, or you can use this QR code here. With this, you can get your first month free, and if you decide to try it, you get a 30-day money back guarantee as long as you check out that link. Okay, so this car is still expected to come in 2026, which is not that far away. The other news we have heard about the R2 is that the batteries are going to be supplied from LG, initially coming from South Korea, but eventually moving to a factory in Arizona. So these will be American sourced batteries, which is pretty great. Initially, it's probably going to be built in the Normal, Illinois plant where they build the other cars, but eventually that will be moved to its own facility in Georgia. They've already filed for the loan for that facility. And this is also where we would expect to see things like the R3 and the R3X in the future. So it seems they're full steam ahead. Now, all that aside, what Rivian is promising to deliver with the R2 seems pretty compelling. The car itself, I think, looks great. From a styling perspective, it seems like they just shrunk down the R1S, which is kind of hard to complain about. The size is nearly identical to the Model Y if you're kind of trying to get a frame of reference. It's just not sloped in the back, so you're going to get more cargo area. I could also see room here for like a third row seat in the future, possibly. I could see that happening. And from a design perspective, just, you know, from the outside and the inside, it just looks like a Rivian. Rivian has their design language, and well, it's here, and it makes a lot of sense, and it makes it exciting to think about buying one of these. Now, okay, elephant in the room, not really an elephant, it's kind of obvious. The Rivian R2 is not out, it doesn't technically exist right now, you can't buy it. So of course, if you are in the market for a car today and you need one now, and you're already considering the Model Y, then that's an easy choice. The Model Y is, as far as I can tell from the time I've had with this, it is excellent. I've got a ton of experience in the original Model Y, and instantly I can say this car is so much better. Like, from the way it feels, your seating position, all that stuff doesn't feel that different, honestly. I mean, it's super comfortable. You're sitting up a little higher compared to the Model 3, all the stuff that you'd expect from a Model Y. It is all here. But what you get that you don't get in the first generation is all these refinements. This car feels significantly more refined. It is significantly quieter thanks to the glass. It feels more compliant, which has always been a complaint with the original Model Y. If you were in the market for a Model Y, I think you're going to be happy that you waited and that now you can get this version, because it really is significantly better. Now, when it comes to driving, charging, all of that, honestly, it's really not that different. The steering feel, the acceleration, the charging speed, all of that is basically the same. Is it technically different? I guess you could say so, but from a day-to-day user standpoint, these cars are essentially the same, but it really just comes down to those refinements. And that is one reason why, when thinking about looking at something like the Rivian R2 and jumping into that, well, that is one area that you're probably not going to get as much refinement in, because the R2 is going to be the first generation of that platform, which means there's going to be things Rivian has to figure out. And in a lot of ways, I'm perfectly fine with that. I love being an early adopter, so getting into Rivian's more mid-size model, being one of the first ones to do that, that actually excites me. But there is something to be said that, you know, this is the second generation of the Model Y, whereas you'd be getting the first generation of the R2. Something to consider for sure. And when you're driving this car and just feeling how compliant, how smooth, how refined it is, it is pretty darn nice, and it's available right now. Now, the R2 being its like first generation on this platform is definitely something to consider, but what does kind of ease me in that thought and doesn't make me too worried is just looking back to the R1. I mean, this was the first car that Rivian had ever delivered, and they pretty much nailed it. Are there issues? Of course. They are now on the second generation of this platform. They made a ton of different tweaks. They haven't fixed everything, but even if you go back to that first car, and I got to drive and experience a early version of the R1T pretty heavily, and up until that point, the only other car that performed and gave me the same feeling as the R1T did was a Tesla. It had that same soul. I know people say EVs don't have souls. I think they do. They're just a little less exciting, but Rivian had that. It felt like it actually had a personality, which is exactly what Rivian is all about. And so even though looking to the R2 might be a little concerning because it's going to be a brand new car, well, I think Rivian has shown that they can in fact deliver on these first generation products. And that, sure, you know, there's going to be issues with it. There's going to be things they're going to tweak as time goes on, but it doesn't mean it's going to be a failure. In fact, I'm pretty confident that they're going to really nail this. And they kind of have to, honestly, because if Rivian doesn't succeed with this new car, which is, you know, slated to be their most popular car by far, well, that might be an issue. Now, I've never really been ashamed to say that I'm not a huge fan of the Model Y. I don't know, I've just never really been a huge proponent of this crossover segment. I love cars, I love SUVs. When you mix them together, I feel like in a lot of ways, instead of getting the best of both worlds, in a lot of ways you get the worst of both worlds. I know most people don't agree with me, and that's why crossovers are the most popular segment that exists. So clearly I'm the weird one here, but that's just my opinion. So the Model Y has never been my particular car, not the one that I've ever wanted. But it has always been on the list because I have a wife who actually does love the Model Y, and so compromise, that's what marriage is all about. But now that I've been behind the wheel, you know what? This thing is not half bad. But going back to that soul I was talking about, that is something that Rivian has really nailed. They are a company that you actually kind of know, you recognize. When you think Rivian, you think certain things. You think adventure, you think capability, and you think, you know, about the design that they have chosen. All of this it matches the brand, and they have really nailed that, I think. And when looking at cars to buy, I think that matters, because if it didn't, well, I would just go buy the cheapest car I could find. I would save a ton of money. Gas is expensive, but it's not that expensive to justify a brand new car. And so if I didn't care about any of that, well, then why would I spend my money on something like an R2 or a Model Y? But here's the thing, it's that Rivian kind of has made a brand for themselves that makes people care. Clearly, it is a brand that people enjoy. And for me, that is especially true because their whole adventure mindset works perfectly for my life. I mean, I've talked about it plenty here on the channel about how we go camping, we go off-roading, we do all these things that are out in nature. I mean, I live at the base of the Rocky Mountains here in Utah, and getting out and having adventures is just part of everyday life here. And having a car that kind of goes along with that lifestyle, I mean, it's definitely enticing. Whereas back when I lived in California, well, Tesla made a ton of sense because I didn't care about like going off road or anything like that. I cared about commuting and, you know, being on the highway efficiently. And well, that's where Tesla really excels in a certain sense. And so because both of these brands have different identities, well, they lend themselves towards certain people for certain things. Now look, I think there are two reasons why you would pick a Model Y or a Tesla in general in 2025 over all the other competition. There's a lot of great cars out there right now and a lot of great options coming, like the Rivian R2, but the reason to pick Tesla still is the main reason, I think, the technology. It is just really hard to beat what Tesla is doing from a computational standpoint, from a feature standpoint, and the fact that it gets better over time and is noticeably better than it used to be, I think is a pretty big testament to what Tesla is doing. And the full self-driving system, whether you think Tesla is being a little optimistic on their delivery timeline, that's a whole different question. But the fact that it can do what it can already do, so I can just turn it on right now and now the car is driving for me, the fact that that is possible and that it actually works and is changing lanes and doing all this stuff without me having to do anything, it works. I mean, is it perfect? No, but it works. And that is just something you can't get in any other car right now. So it's hard to say, you know, that if that's what you're looking for, that you should look elsewhere. So yeah, after getting behind the wheel of the new Model Y, it's really gotten me excited about what the future holds, because Rivian is looking to this Model Y as direct competition, and Tesla is looking at Rivian as competition. And so when we see these two brands that I think have delivered excellent products to this date, well, it gets me excited for what the future holds. Now, Rivian R2 is not out yet. Who knows if it will come out on time, economy, politics, all this stuff. Who knows what's really going to happen? But assuming it does come out, assuming 2026 is the target date that does happen, well, we only have, you know, half a year, maybe a year at most, before we actually see this car. And once that's out, choosing between the Model Y and the Rivian R2, I think is actually going to be a pretty big decision. And, well, I'm here for it.